Hi, welcome to another installment of Ask Augustin, my masterclass series. Today I wanted to talk about how to practice and also how not to practice, some things to avoid bad habits that can waste time and be counterproductive. So I find that one of the easiest bad habits to get into is to fall into the trap of repeating things a lot, hoping that they'll get better. But actually, when there's a problem in a passage that keeps recurring, like a certain note is always flat or always sharp, or the E string keeps whistling, or something isn't clean, there often is a cause to the problem. Some part of the motions you're doing is not quite yet right, and it's important to identify that cause and find a solution. And then when the problem's fixed, then it makes sense to actually repeat it a few times to solidify it. But it can be counterproductive to just play something over and over without having fixed the problem, because then you might end up actually kind of practicing the mistake, making it even harder to fix later on. It's also easy to get into the habit of kind of doodling and doing things that that feel good while you're practicing, and it becomes a habit, but it's not actually that useful. For example, if I'm practicing a passage and I go like what that does, it can be useful sometimes just to check intonation of a certain note, and sometimes you have to slow things down and really go in order. But when these things become too much of a habit, it actually then becomes really hard to actually play through in context at full speed, because your whole body and your hand is used to taking that extra time. You're used to playing those extra notes, and it can be almost like subconscious, like it became second nature, and you don't want that to happen. This is something I used to do all the time, and then I carefully trained myself trying to not do it. I tried to always actually play the passage, and then if it wasn't good, then I think about it, but not to do this stuff in between. It's also important not to always start a passage in the same spot. That sometimes switch it up, change the context of it, and eventually, as you get closer to a performance, put things more and more into a larger context, and eventually you'll do run-throughs and things like that, so that the way that the piece flows from start to finish feels second nature. Otherwise, it can happen that you step on stage and step in front of people, and as you perform, you feel really different. It doesn't feel the way it did in the practice room. So in order to prepare for a performance, I try to almost pretend while I'm practicing that I'm already on stage. I try to breathe the same way when I practice as I will on stage. If I'm going to perform sitting down, like in chamber music, for example, then I actually practice the piece sitting down. And if I'm going to perform standing up, then I practice standing up, more or less in the kind of posture and with the kind of intensity that I want to have on stage. This can really help. You once you step on stage. It will feel more familiar, like this is what you practiced, rather than it feeling suddenly different from how I did in the practice room. The other thing that's maybe one of the hardest things to do while you practice is to listen to yourself very critically while you're playing. This can be almost paralyzing when you get overly critical and but it's very important. That it's very easy for there to be little details and habits that we actually don't notice anymore because we got used to them. Little intonation habits, playing certain things sharp or flat always, or rhythmic habits that don't really make sense, but while we're playing they seem to make sense because we're so used to them. Or shifting noises between notes that we don't even realize we're doing. And I think this is something very important to be self-aware while you play. One thing that can help a lot with that is actually to record yourself practicing, and then listen to that. You'll suddenly become aware of a lot of things you didn't realize you were doing. Sometimes that can be more useful than just playing the piece and working on the piece over and over. That to take this step back and listen to yourself from the outside, you suddenly become aware of a lot of things. I hope these tips are helpful, and I'll see you next time for the next Ask Augustine.